Hi. Good morning. All right. So since we normally start class with a goodbye, let's start class with a hello. So please turn on your microphones and say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone from Guadalajara.
Hi, team, and everybody.
Hola, buenos días. Buenos días para todos.
Ciao.
Morning, thầy Tim. Good morning.
Juan An.
That was
Good morning.
yay. That was nice. I think it's we just finished up here in Mexico yesterday. And it kind of feels like, there's like this in between time, right? Like we just had a big program, Hi, Shanti.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Hi. And then it kind of ends, right? Things end really fast. Like everyone comes together, there's this sort of big Dharma extravaganza, right? And then it's like, boop, boop, it's over, right? And in that being over, like we just basically take everything down really fast. It's like we build up a set, we build up everything. Oh, my internet's not that good, is that correct? Yeah. Well, that's interesting. It's good. Okay. All right. Okay. It's just everyone seems to be moving really slow. Maybe you can hear me. That's fine. All right. Well, then if it gets weird, just let me know. And then all of a sudden it's like poof, right? We just dismantle everything, in like 20 minutes, right? Boom, everything in the suitcases, get out of here, right? I remember one day that I was with someone at Diamond Mountain who was kind of sad. They were like, wow, this was so beautiful 10 minutes ago. And now the whole room is empty, right? And I looked at her and I said, I was like, yeah, we built a mandala. We built our version of the perfect world. And then it was like in a single instant, boom, that vision, that place we were trying to hold on to. Like the expression in Spanish is like bomba de humo, like a smoke bomb just goes off and then everything disappears, when the smoke dissipates. It's actually my favorite way to leave a party too. It's just like all of a sudden Tim disappears and then I'll have to say goodbye to everybody. It's actually not my favorite way to leave a party, but so there's this thing where things just end, right? And then it's all of a sudden the seeds ran out for that world, right? That Dharma world, that place where we come together to learn about ideas, learn about how to be a better person, how to be, how to go deeper into our practice, right? All of those things, and then we forge friendships with like-minded people. We all come together and we're like, oh, there's more people in the world. right? There's more people who are like interested in these weird ideas that are about helping other people, like that are, focused on service. They're focused on fundraising for others, right? Who are willing to give up their life for a week, right? A lot of people came on the first night in Mexico to our public talk, and then they were like, I want to stay, right? And then we were trying to find ways so they could afford to stay or find scholarships or like, and then they were like, I'm going to drop my whole life, right? And I'm going to stay here for a week. And it's like, yeah, good job. Good job at choosing the cool part, right? So I didn't say anything when it froze. All right, and I'm gonna. You guys can still hear me. I'm changing to my phone network to see if that's any better. Hold on just 1 second. That's fun. There you go. All right. Now it's even worse. That's phenomenal. Okay. Well, if you guys say you all right, you guys aren't moving. Can you guys hear what I'm saying? Okay, all right. Well, then I'm just going to keep going. And maybe we just won't see each other today. That'll be fun. Okay. So I'm going to record from this side for you guys, just in case. So there's this moment when everything just kind of goes away, right? The whole thing just vanishes. And some people, and then you got to go back to your real life, right? You have to go back and say, okay, well, that world ended. Now my next world comes back. My next world is like, and it's your old world, right? It's your old world. But, you jumped into this deep community of practitioners, and something happens, right? Like something changes, some things something tangible happens, but we don't know what that is. Like we're not sure, right? And then we pop back into our old life and we're like, oh crap, here's my old life. How do I take what I just learned? How do I carry this community? How do I carry this feeling, this connectedness, this wisdom? How do I connect it back into my real life? Real life, right? You know, so there's these moments of transition. Like these moments where like it does feel like an end and then a beginning, right? And especially with the Dharma program, right? So in a way, and sometimes, you know, so like, let's go like think of another example, like a breakup, right? You break up with your partner or they break up with you, you know, depending if it's a single moment or if it's a transition period, or like, you know, what's happening, but you're not quite there yet, you know, whatever those things are, right? But the moment when it's final, right? And you walk out the door, the other person walks out the door, even if you're the one breaking up and you're finally relieved, or you're the one that didn't want it, or maybe you both wanted it, you know, all the different permutations. All of a sudden, life is completely different, right? It's this big transition point, right? And so there's, at least in my experience, it's almost like, it's like, well, who am I going to be next? Right? What's my life going to be next? And there's this transition period. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. Sometimes, you know, translators, we have a thing in English called rebound relationship. Like you just go and meet someone to fill the void, but it doesn't last very long. But you're in the in-between. Like your life that you knew ended and now the new one begins. Or let's say, like you have an accident, right? You know, people come back from war and have lost a leg, or car accident, all these different things. There's these moments of in between space where you're not sure what to do. And so what does that feel like? Like, what do you feel like in that space? Like between a Dharma event in your real life, or in a breakup, or in these major transitions, like what does that space feel like? If we're honest with ourselves. I'm sorry, Sophia. Yeah. Sad, right? Not able to sleep. How else do people feel? Right? Empty, right? We have an empty here. We have like emotionally on edge, vulnerable. Like there's a lack. It doesn't feel real, uncertain. Yasheng goes and eats food. Right. It's different for most people, but I would say that there's maybe some commonality, right? Like confusion, lack of connection, loneliness. I like the word uncertainty, right? You're not sure what's next, right? Destabilized, right? So a lot of people ask me, and I get this question a lot. They're like, you know, in these events, it's so beautiful. The energy is high. You know, I feel like when I leave that I can go, I can, you know, I can change the world. I can do this. I can be a practitioner. I can do my meditations. I want to have those realizations, right? And then you go to your first day of work. And you're able to hold on to it. But it's like you look around you and like, at least in what happens for me. Everyone like kind of looks at me and they're like, "Ooh, you're different." But you look at everyone else and you're just like, "You're not different." You know? And eventually, like, you know, how do you know that energy is going to creep back in? It's like a parasite sometimes. You know, and then I have people say, "Oh, I don't want to go back to my real life. I just want to like stay here." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, that's not possible." Boom, everything's in a suitcase and you leave, right? The mandala dissolved, right? You know, for so long I was attached to the like the feeling, like the energizing feeling of a community teaching, which, by the way, if you have opportunities to have them, hold them, or do them, or organize them, it's one of the greatest karmas you can do. But they asked me the question, how do I hold this? How do I take this in? You know, and some of the we have practical advices, right? It's like, well, you know, choose one thing to integrate into your life, right? Choose one. Like, don't do all of them. Like, can't change all of those habits immediately, but choose one. Like, maybe you change your diet. Maybe you add more meditation, or maybe you add a little bit more yoga, or maybe your book practice is better. You know, choose one thing, right, to go from dharma to real life. You know, in the beginning, like I didn't really, you know, I wanted that a lot, but I didn't want the lifestyle that I saw, like a lot of, you know, what I saw, perceived, right? The perception, right? You know, people who went from event to event to event to event until I'm doing it, right? But I made a commitment and I said, I want those lives to be together, right? I don't want that separation. So, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Interrupted. All right. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. So, how do we bring it all together, right? How do we not live that separation, right? How do we, like, you know, we have these transitions in our life, right? Where we have moments where they just move and then you move on to something else, right? And it doesn't feel like a flow, it feels like a break. That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about those breaks, right? Where you have moments where they just move and then you move on to something else, right? And it doesn't feel like a flow, it feels like a break. That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about those breaks. Where you have moments where they just move and then you move on to something else, right? And it doesn't feel like a flow, it feels like a break. That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about those breaks. right? And I'm trying to give you a feeling of what it might be like to be what we're talking about realms of existence, right? That's where we are. We're talking about the realms of existence. So we've talked about, form realms, formless realm beings. We've talked about animals. We talked about the six, what are they called? The six sufferings of being a human, right? Then then there's this thing, right? This sort of, we call it a bardo being, like a being who's kind of in between life. Like you go through the death process, right? And then before that new life starts, there's this in-between being, right? There's this in-between space, place, experience, right? That we call the Bardoa, the Bardo world. Okay. Hold on just 1 second here. Okay. Right. So I tried to and part of it is like, what would it be like to be like this being? Right. And the idea of like, when you're in between things and you're not really sure where things are going next, like that's how these beings are rising. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion. And so what they say is that, what is said is that when you die, the next seeds kind of, what do you want me to repeat, Julieta? That, of course, you can't know what I needed to repeat because you didn't hear it. I don't know what I said. I'm sorry. I said, I don't know what I said. I'm sorry. These beings, oh, the seeds, right? So at the moment of death, there is a seed, right? There's a seed that goes off. And before the next life begins, there's a kind of, they say that you take a form before your next birth that's similar to your next birth. So it's kind of like a waiting zone, like a waiting area, right? You go to the doctor and like there's that little room where they make you sit for an hour before they take you in, or like you're waiting for you're like flying to me kind of feels like between places, kind of feels like a bardo. Although for me, it's usually a paradise. I love airplanes. I love, the being in the sky and then popping into a new place. But so these seeds go off. And then you're kind of, before that next birth happens, you're in this in-between place. Not quite yet reborn, but you've already passed through death. and the Abhidharma talks about that there's 7 possible periods of 7 days after one person dies, that they exist in this Bardo world. And so after each 7 days, they could then find a rebirth, right? And they say that the maximum number of days that someone, human days, that, oh, I like that, Anna. It's a one-way ticket. Yes. Like, that's good. You spend up to 49 days. And so there's these times when people do prayers for Bardo beings, that they find their next life well. Right. So that's how they talk about it, right? And in the text, the example the text gives, we've already given some examples, right? Like, you buy a one-way plane ticket, right? Or there's an in-between, right? There's an in-between with, like, between a relationship. Lena, I don't know what the meaning of these 7 periods of 7 days is. It's just what they say. They say that's how long a Bardo being exists before the next rebirth, up to 49 days. There's different presentations of this. We're starting from the Abhidharma point of view. So in that classical example, that they say that like when you plant an actual seed in the ground, right? That before there's the seed, he says, Jim Jumpe Young says, that there has to be some kind of intermediary of a sprout before it becomes a plant. Okay. That's the example they use, right? And it's kind of, think of it that way, right? Like, how does, Nagarjuna argues this all the time. We're not going Nagarjuna point of view, okay? Not yet. But the idea is that there has to be something in the middle, right? There has to be some transitionary phase or state between the seed and the sprout, because the seed doesn't look like the sprout. That's what they like, and we kind of confirm that, right? The seeds are these little, they're really tiny seeds. All these little green sprouts, right? And like, well, how did that thing that didn't look like a plant start looking like a plant? So the argument is there has to be something in between. So that's the argument of a Bardo being, right? That between this human life or any death and whatever rebirth shows up, whether it's a hell being or an animal or another human or a deva or anything it is, right? There has to be a transition because you don't look like the way you used to look. So they say, okay. Desmond, that's a good question. I don't think so. The text says that after 49 days, they will definitely be reborn. From what I know, there could be some other explanations. I never asked that question before. It's a good question. So what we said was this intermediate being, they actually use the language like, what do they look like? Is they start to look like, they say the being before. Meaning they start looking like the being they will become, the being before them, the being that's in front of them, right? So they take on the sort of shape, characteristics of the next one, right? If you're going to go to become a cow, you're going to start looking like a cow, right? You're going to start taking those characteristics of a cow or of a hell being or of a deva, okay? And so what they say, this is kind of, so what they say is the way it works, okay, is like, how does that being then move into their next life? How does it, they kind of move in? So the idea is that there's one quality that's necessary. The first quality is that there's a mother who can give birth. Right? There's a mother who's still capable of giving birth. And the words they use are that they're still menstruating. You know, not all beings come from mothers who are menstruating, I guess, but I don't know. But the idea is that there's a mother, like for a human rebirth, there's a mother or a cow or a sow who's still menstruating, right? And then what they say is that the next thing that happens is that there's a feeling of desire between the mother and the father, right? And that feeling between the two then creates the sexual contact between the two, right? Have a desire, you know. And so basically what happens to create the next life is that there's a mother and father, right? They have desire between them. And that desire becomes attractive, right? Becomes attractive to the Bardo being, right? Because that Bardo being is already in a kind of form similar to the next life. They're already throwing seeds for that. So they're almost like being attracted to that next life, like that desire is already arising. You know, and I've heard people talk about this. They, you know, some people have said that they felt the presence of their child before they got pregnant. Right? I've heard people say that. I'm like, sounds pretty much like Buddhism to me. It sounds pretty like possible. So they're just attracted. Like the Bardo being's not like, oh my God, I'm going to be born again. It's not like that. They're just attracted to they're basically just attracted to the desire that their parents are having. You know, and the other word that they use for a Bardo being is one of the beings who lives on smells, right? It's a weird word. And, you know, so they almost like smell, right? just like you wake up in the morning at a hotel and you smell the coffee downstairs, like you can smell the baking bread, right? You're like, oh, I want that coffee, right? It's like they can smell the sexual union between their next parents, and they're just like attracted to it, right? That's what they say. So in the case of a human, right? So the Bardo being's just like chilling out, doing Bardo things, whatever Bardo beings do, right? Like imagine yourself in your intermediate state, like between relationships or between Dharma events, like probably not doing much. It's like it's just an intermediate, right? It's almost like from a distance, they see their parents having sex. And then they're attracted to it. So this is what they say. They're attracted to it. And so something happens, they're like, oh, that's something that I can enjoy. Right. And so then they kind of come over and like, and then they enter in, like they're just like playing around, because these Bardo beings there's actually kind of cool things that they can do. So one of the things that they can do depending on which being they're going to become, like the first Dalai Lama says, well, they can fly through the sky, or they can show acts of great strength, or they can move at incredible speeds. They have all these different kinds of powers, like they can pass through mountains, they can go through walls, they can just kind of go wherever their mind takes them, like they're not impeded by a wall. So with all of those things that they can do, like, we might call them, sometimes we might call them spirits. They're not really spirits, but they become attracted to, I'm just looking at my empty hotel bed, right? I'm just like imagining I'm a Bardo being and my parents, that's too much. I'm just kidding. So the parents are like, they're having relations, and they go over and they're like, oh, this is fun. I can enjoy this. And then they move into the womb and something happens. And they get stuck. That's what they say, that they just get stuck on the inside, right? So all these it's an interesting idea of explaining how pregnancy works, right? Like it's not just enough to have menstruation, not be ovulating, right? Sperm meeting the egg, all those other kinds of things, right? There also needs to be a Bardo being around to enter in, right? If there's no Bardo being around, then pregnancy won't happen, right? The questions you guys are bringing up are interesting. It's kind of non-specific. It's not about, it's not about what's like the circumstances around the sex that's happening, right? In the cases of rape, or you're not wanting to have sex with this person or something like that. Those kind of things, the Bardo being is not really able to perceive those different things. They're not really connected with the next life. They're just attracted to, they're only able to see certain things, I imagine. They have some perceptions, but they don't have all of those perceptions. Like, oh, who are those parents? What are they like? Now one could probably argue that, karmically, you'd be attracted to things that you have karmic propensities for. We can maybe argue that. But it's not so much like, it's not like choosing your parents. It's not like oh, I remember this really cool couple. Like, I've kind of imagined, like, if I were to die right now, like, who of my friends are going to be born of me? Like, who are going to be my next parents? Kind of thought about it a little bit. But in the end, it's not really a choice so much, because at the point of death, the next seeds just ripen. Like, your next form of your next life come out of a lottery in general. And so then you're just floating around doing bardo things. And then you might happen upon a similar being that you're going to become having sex. That's probably how it happens. And then you're just like, ooh, let's go play. And then boom, you get stuck. Right? Stuck in your next life. So it's kind of depressing, actually, if you think about it. It's like, because of your desire, you're like, oh, I'd like this sex, right? That you just plop into a next being. So the being that they say conception is the start of life. Good question, Shanti. So one of the questions that comes up in the text is, once you've kind of taken this form after rebirth, right? You've taken the form. Could someone translate that question, please, for me? Once you've taken that form, could you be re-diverted, is the question. Can you be re-diverted? Like, okay, I take the form of a cow, but once I become a bardo being, can I be diverted to another type of birth? Right? So in general, the first Dalai Lama says, well, no, the power of the seed, the power of your past deeds that are throwing the bardo beings towards like a hell realm, or towards a cow, or towards a deva realm, or something like that. It's the same energy that'll project that being when they are born. So in that way, the answer is no, sorry. Sorry, it's depressing. However, and this is the part that I want to get to in the class today, is that the first Dalai Lama says that, well, there is a type of being where perhaps it's possible. And he says it's called the class of the pure. But the idea is that somehow in the in-between, that being achieves a state of nirvana in the in-between. Like they're throwing a type of Bardo being that's able to achieve nirvana, a state where no mental afflictions are possible. And then that then influences where they can go in their next rebirth. You guys are asking all the right questions because we're thinking about this from an Abhidharma point of view. Sort of. Okay. And there's a reason why we're doing that. And the main reason for that is the time of death is extremely uncomfortable, extremely scary. We have no control over it. We have no control over that. And so the experiences that happen at death start feeling like they're self-existent. Like your wisdom typically just goes out the window. Any wisdom that you may have goes out the window. Again, another cool question. If a life happens, then they would say, yes, a Bardo being entered the womb at the point of fertilization through in vitro fertilization. That's what they would say, which wasn't possible during the time when these texts were written. But this is where we want to go today. This is the fun part. Okay. The fun part is, can we do something in that in between? And there's just this little suggestion in this class of one could achieve nirvana between death and rebirth. And then you might be able to redirect towards your next rebirth, or you can be redirected to a different rebirth. Okay. So this is where we're going to go today. This is not in the course. This is not in the reading. I'm pulling this from somewhere else. If you're interested, it's in Lamrim 23. Okay, 20 programs ago, 21 programs ago. So the idea is that we can use this process to help force certain seeds to come out, which is really cool. Because generally we cannot. Generally, it's just like a lottery. You know, like the example I used in class the other day wasn't ACI class. It was, I don't remember which class it was. I used the example of the submarine going to the Titanic that, you know, imploded on the way down, right? They're all just kind of hanging out, you know, having a good time, and immediately death happens in a single instant for them, right? Immediate implosion, and that's the end, right? Surprise death. But if you don't have a surprise death, or even if you do have a surprise death, if you practice through meditation the death process, what happens to you typically at the time of death? We have a chance of moving through some of those random seeds that might show up and possibly do some pretty cool things at that time. Like, what would happen if you could maintain your awareness through that process? Most of the time, we cannot. But if you look at like, it's interesting, people that have almost died but came back to life, like they had near-death experiences, they will the report some of the experiences that are actually experiences, and you're like, yep, that's what our text says. They didn't quite go all the way through, and somehow they were drawn back into this life. So if we can maintain an awareness through all of that and become familiar with the process and familiar with it in a way that we then begin to release our fear, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty afraid of what happens when I die. I don't want to die. Like, I don't want that. And I'm as, most people I know don't want that. When they find out they're sick, you have terminal illness, like it's a process to accept it. Sometimes never accept it. But I think as reasonable practitioners, we know that because there's birth, there's death. There is always going to be a transition. Our lives are transitions. Right? If you really, really look at your life, it is a transition. Right? There's not any real certainty of what's going on. Yeah, you feel like there's these big moments of transition. But like, I'm going to walk out that door in 20 minutes, go get some coffee with some friends, right? And that's a transition, right? Each moment is kind of a transition. Each moment is new seeds going off. I feel like myself in every moment, right? Why does Tim come up with Tim every moment? Like, why do I experience Tim as Tim in every moment? Right? Galina experiences Galina or Maria as Maria, right? But they're just seeds going off, right? In a flow, right? And eventually that flow of Tim is going to stop. That flow of Galina, that flow of Maria is going to stop. But somehow we're kind of blind to it. Like, oh, Tim's going to get up and Tim's going to finish packing his suitcase. And then Tim's going to go through the door. And then Tim's going to go down the stairs. And then Tim's going to find his friends. And then Tim's going to have coffee, right? But each moment is literally a transition. And death is no different, right? There's a certain process that we go through, there's a similar process we go through. But the flow of seeds ripening never stops. Right? You are your seeds ripening. You aren't you. You aren't even your seeds. You are the ripenings. Good luck with that one. Meditate on that. All right. So in the death process, there's certain, they call them like kinds of hallucinations that happen. And those hallucinations happen because as this physical body dissolves, like as this physical body dies, right? It goes through a certain process of dying, right? Your breath stops, your heartbeat stops, right? Then the blood stops flowing, and then the cells stop having oxygen, and then there's like the movement of energies in your body slow down and then just stop, right? But as those elements are dissolving in the body, the elements that are holding those energies together, there's a process. There's a similar dissolution of the elements that happens, that if you can become aware of them and meditate on them, that you might be able to hit when you finally flip into the Bardo state. You might be able to maintain awareness. So somebody asked the question, you know, can you choose your next life? Can you choose your parents? You know, all these things. Well, a really strong practitioner can, right? That we call them, you know, trucals. We call them, you know, emanation. They're basically emanations at that point, right? Reincarnated beings. We're all, the funny thing is, I'm like, that's dumb. We're all reincarnated beings. I kind of find it stupid. Like, but these are particular beings that are able, they've achieved a state where they're able to choose how they come back. So what we're going to do, and if they don't, well, the thing is, if they have compassion, they will come back, Lena, right? They want to serve other beings, right? They want to come back, right? Shanti asked a weird, interesting question. One day I'll send you guys the picture. One day we were outside of the college in Sedona. It was late. We had a late class. Well, it was a winter time, so it wasn't, you know, but the sun had set, you know, and the winter time is so clear in Sedona. Like the sky is phenomenal. The number of stars you can see is outrageous. We walked out, okay, and then I was just standing next to him, like looking at the stars and just admiring the universe, I guess. And he pointed and he's like, you know what that star is? And I said, yeah, that's Sirius. And he's like, good. And I'm like, oh, well, glad I know my stars. And he says, that's Sirius. And then he says, that's where we're going next. And I was like, what? And he's like, bye. And he gets in his car and drives away. I don't know. Maybe that answers your question, Shanti. No, Maria, emanation and reincarnation is not the same thing. An emanation is a chosen reincarnation. Reincarnation is just a general uncontrolled thing. Okay, so what I'd like to do in the next little bit is I'd like to give you guys an outline of those visualizations. And then in next class, we're going to do that meditation. All right. And so then we're going to have a practice that we can start practicing the death process. Like what's going to happen to us so that we can be ready to make that transition. Okay. So here we go. Get out your pens and pencils. The internet's not good enough for me to share anything. So just get them out and then we'll do it later. So there's 4 basic elements in the body. If you take in YSI, you know them. They are. Did we do that one? Well, that's cool. Maybe we did it. We'll do it again. Nice. Earth, water, fire, wind. Those are the 4 basic elements in the body. Earth, water, fire, and wind. And there's an order for that. And if you memorize it, makes it easier. So the first element that dissolves is earth, like the solidity. Okay. And so there's two levels of the dissolution. The first one is more of a gross level, like obvious, and one is more subtle. So on the gross one, the first one that goes is the earth, and you kind of like imagine like a big earthquake or like rocks falling off a mountain, like, you know, like if you've ever seen those movies where they blow up planets. Sachu Medlung. Thank you, Anastasia. Very nice Tibetan. Good job. So that goes first, right? The solidity, right? Next thing that goes is the water, the ch. And then you kind of visualize like a big, massive flood. Like I kind of think of the thing that kind of comes is like I kind of think of like a tsunami, or I think of like the story in the Bible of like Noah's Ark, where it just rains and rains and rains, and the water just covers everything, right? You know, like a dam breaks and the water just flows out, right? Uncontrollably. The third thing that goes is the fire, the May, right? So then you're surrounded by fire, like everything burns, like you're in a hot desert, you know, scorching desert, everything's burning, right? And then the last one is the winds dissolve. So at the gross level, like it's like being inside a tornado or a, you know, you're just being spun around, like, right? Just absorbed in wind, right? And then that all quiets down. And the first thing that happens, so now the subtle energies start dissolving, more subtle. And so like you kind of see yourself like the subtle earth energy, as the subtle earth energy is dissolving, off in the distance, you see a mirage. Right? When translators, a mirage is, I'm not sure if you know the word. It's like when you're driving on a road and it looks like there's water on the road up in the distance. And as you keep driving, you never reach it. Right? Or like you're in a desert and you think there's a big pool of water because you're thirsty. And you try to get there and then you get there and there's no water, right? It's a mirage. It looks like water, but it's not, right? So as the subtle earth element is dissolving, you have a vision of a mirage. Like you just see a mirage of water. Okay. So then as the subtle water element dissolves, you have a vision of smoke. Right? Like smoke from a fire, it's almost like a cloudy fog. Like if you've ever been in a place where, yeah, it's kind of like a fog. All right. So the water element is the water element dissolves, and then you're left with the fire, you see. And so the water element dissolves, the fire, it's like just a smoke. Kind of. Okay. As the fire element dissolves, you start seeing like almost like fireflies, like little sparks. Okay. Like sparks of light. and kind of like little fireworks. Like that's how I would describe it, as little fireworks, like little tiny, like just like going off, like filling the space, like filling the smoke almost. You know, and then the wind element, the next thing that appears is just kind of like it's like a still candle flame. Like the stillest flame possible. Not moving, there's no wind, no movement, nothing, just light. Subtle light, like a candle flame that's not moving. The subtlety for the earth, Christian, is the mirage. Off in the distance. It's like you're almost like walking towards a mirage, like on the earth, and the mirage is off in the distance. So each one becomes subtler and subtler. And then after that, the wind element dissolves. Then there's three, there's three stages. One is like it's like being surrounded by moonlight on a full moon evening. Okay. And then that dissolves into a subtle red light that you might experience at a sunset. Right? Just a soft red light. Like you see this, like the color of the sun as it's setting over the ocean. And there's a redness to that, but that redness, soft red, is like all encompassing around you. And then the next level is, they call it near black attainment. It's just black, like almost nothing, like nothing. Like it's probably better to say nothing versus black. It's probably experienced as black, but it's nothing. And then that dissolves into, oh, Subhuti, that dissolves into emptiness. Okay. Dissolves into the place where it dissolves into emptiness. And if you can maintain awareness through all of that, you see, and not have an emotional reaction to it, not get scared, and understand what's happening, and being able to stabilize your mind. And this is why we need to meditate. The last thing, Christian, I wouldn't say to dissolve into the void. I would say dissolve into emptiness on that last thing. But yes. So you can see that it's very easy to get lost in that. It's very easy to get swept up into it. It's very easy to then lose awareness. Because as each of those elements are dissolving, your consciousness's connection to those elements is being removed. So the things that you thought your consciousness was based upon are not there anymore. And so most of the time, we just pass through this all the time and it just happens. Just happens, right? Somewhere along the way, you just lose awareness and it's gone. Right. And then out of that state of emptiness comes the next life. So what we're going to do in the next class is we're going to start. Who chooses which seed should open in this emptiness? Okay. That's a good question. If you've been able to maintain awareness up until that point, if you're able to stay aware, that is considered a direct perception of emptiness. That's one way to have the direct perception of emptiness. And then there's this moment of identification that happens with that emptiness. In the Tibetan is day now, I am that. I am that. Yes. Now, it would be really nice not to have to wait till death to have that experience. Right? Right, but we practice it, right? We practice it. Withdrawing all appearances. The withdrawal of all the appearances in your meditation is a way to get to the direct perception of emptiness. Okay. In this life, in this time, you want the day now, it's I think it's this. Let me just look really quickly, Maria. Where am I going to find that? That's a good one. Hold on. I just have to find it. If you guys care, I'm looking through the VOD. You're getting me a side note right now. If you guys want to hear it, go to fire ceremonies. If you're interested, go to our fire ceremonies. You might hear it. I'm almost there. Hold on. Oh, there it is. I think it's this. I have to verify. They know I am that. I'm in this. Yeah, there it is. Now I'm every existing thing joined in one. I am their absolute purity. There it is. Thank you for drawing that out. Good job. I am that. right? So you have this moment of identification with emptiness. Then cool shit happens. Okay. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So in the next class, we're going to then go through that meditation to start practicing it, right? So then you can, because at that state of emptiness, right, after all the elements dissolve, that's when the Bardo being comes out, right? But if we can take that space, and do something with it, then we can transform. We could transform death, the in-between, and rebirth into something more powerful. We can use this natural process and do something cool with it. And that's the point of ACI 8. Okay. Underneath all of it. Because we don't want to be reborn in these other realms, because those other realms it's impossible to do any of this work. Try to teach your cat to do the dissolution. Maybe my cats can do it, but in general, they cannot, right? So, right. So the last thing I wanted to say is that, I've heard this said in many, many different ways, and I don't know how to navigate it. So I'm just going to tell you what I've heard, and then we can think about it. So I've heard this description of death, Bardo, in between 49 days, then rebirth. But I've also heard it described as that next life is the perception. It's just a shift of fly safely, Sandra. I will see you soon. It's just a shift of perception. It's a shift in seeds. It's a shift of seeds where you're in one life and then you're just in the next, right? In one moment you're looking at a hand, and the next moment you're looking at a paw, like of a dog. And I've heard it described that way. So you have to think about it. Like, is there a Bardo being? Yes. Is there a shift of perceptions? Yes. Which one is it? Figure it out. You got to meditate on it, right? But either way, it still doesn't take away from the fact that there's a shift. There's a death process that happens, and then the next life happens. So how are we going to get prepared for it? That's all. How are we going to get prepared for it? How are we going to get prepared? Not exactly, Lena, but I'm going to finish with that point. What is with you guys knowing exactly what I'm going to say today? This is great. You don't need me anymore. This is wonderful. So how do we get to a place where we can find a bit of safety? So if you understand the pen well enough, okay. If you understand the pen well enough, then you can be assured that you're never going to have a lower rebirth. there's a stage in the path of preparation before you see emptiness directly, that if you reach that and you reach it well, if you understand the pen well, you can reach that stage, that state, and then you can't ever fall back down. So that's why maybe we teach the pen over and over and over again, right? So people can, so you have an opportunity if you can get people to that spot, then everything's okay. You don't have to worry about them anymore. They're kind of on the way out. There's 4 stages to the path of preparation. It's called Jorlam Se. So you reach that and you don't have to worry. Then all the rest will just be figured out.
Hi everyone. Teacher Tim lost his internet connection and he asked us to say goodbye in all the languages. So please open your microphone and say goodbye.
Thanks, Ale. Bye, everyone.
Yes, Ale.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
拜，再见，老师
再见，
再见，
拜拜，同学们再
everyone
见。
Next
谢谢
class,
Sharon 老师的
July
翻译，
15.
拜拜，
Ciao tutor.
拜拜，拜拜
Adiós.
Thank you very much for the class. Bye.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow.
Thanks.